It's about 12 months on now, after we all witnessed those shocking media pile-on attacks against the late Cardinal George Pell, led by the ABC's Louise Milligan and a whole lot of others, saw him deny the presumption of innocence. And of course, about 12 months ago now, we buried Cardinal Pell. He unjustly spent 13 months in prison before his conviction for historical child sexual assault allegations was unanimously quashed by the full bench of the High Court. Until his death, he believed that he'd been targeted by corrupt forces in Rome in response to his clean-up of the Vatican's finances. Gerard Henderson documented the hostile media campaign in his book, Cardinal Pell, The Media Pylon and Collective Guilt, and has just released a new edition. The author, Gerard Henderson, head of the Sydney Institute as well, joins me now. Gerard, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I mentioned that we're 12 months on from the death of what I regard as a great man. Why is it so important we need to revisit this media pylon against the late Cardinal?
Well, I think he was important. He was the most important churchman in Australian history. I think that's true to say. He was an international figure. He had people who disliked him. He had people who liked him. But I think the important point is that he was a great Christian leader, not just to Catholics. And I went to his requiem in Sydney, and I noticed there that it was a very multicultural audience, attendance, congregation, and that reflected his broad support among all kinds of Christians from all kinds of places. And he sort of predicted that the Australian Catholic Church would become a multicultural church, would become essentially an Asian church plus some others in it, and that's what's happened. So he was a great figure, but I think the other part of it is that this is one of the most important criminal cases in Australian history, that what you had was a campaign against George Pell, led by essentially the Victorian legal system, with a big pile-on by mainly the ABC and The Age in Melbourne, the ABC office in Melbourne, The Age, the Saturday paper, the Sydney Morning Herald, the Guardian Australia, they all led it. But the essential point was that he was charged by Victoria Police on 26 charges. Not one of them got up. So the Victoria Police went down 26 zip, and they then said it was a success. The Director of Public Prosecutions in 2 cases could not explain the case. I go into all this in my book with heavy documentation. When it got to the High Court, the Director of Public Prosecutions for Victoria couldn't explain the case and performed abysmally. And then the High Court of Australia, in a 7-zip decision, overthrew the majority judgment of Victoria's Chief Justice and the President of the Victorian Court of Appeal. There was a brilliant dissent in the Court of Appeal by Justice Mark Weinberg, which is one of the greatest judgments in Australian legal history.
I agree.
And the High Court essentially upheld Justice Weinberg's dissent. So you've got a real pile-on, and what's really required here, if Victoria is serious about its legal system, there should be some inquiry into how this case went so badly and how Victorians up in the dreadfully embarrassing position of virtually all its legal system being defeated 7-zip in the High Court.
What about the ABC, though, and the media side of things at Media Pylon? I agree with you. I think what we saw transpire both through the police and the Victorian legal system is terrifying. There will be someone else after Cardinal Pell subjected to this sort of punishment through the media. But what about the ABC? Because people like Louise Milligan, they still have all their awards over books and programs about Cardinal Pell. Well, 7-zip in the High Court says they were wrong.
Well, I understand, I've heard that Louise Milligan's next book's a book of fiction, but you could say that the book on Cardinal Pell was a book of fiction. It just doesn't stand up. But it wasn't just Louise Milligan, although there was Sarah Ferguson, there was Paul Kennedy, there were Michael Rowland, there was a whole heap of them. And what the ABC wouldn't do was to hear alternative views. I was never asked on the ABC. Frank Brennan has got a book out, like a recent new edition, like my new edition. The ABC won't discuss any matters with Frank Brennan or myself. So what you've got here is an act of censorship, which is totally unprofessional. And in my book, I list 120 journalists who were in the anti-Pell pylon, who were Pell antagonists. 40 of them are ABC journalists. They're all criticised. Not one of them has come back to me and said I've got anything wrong. but not one of them will discuss what I've said on the ABC where I've been deplatformed. So I don't care myself, I've got other platforms, but what it says something terrible about the taxpayer-funded public broadcaster, that it won't engage in any kind of debate on a controversial issue where it's got it hopelessly wrong.
All right, well, if you care about how the media treats big issues, please get hold of Gerard's book. Gerard Henderson, thank you for your time.